Okay, so in the last class, you have seen a phenomena called the burnout of, or say the burnout point or the burnout phenomena during boiling. So what happens exactly? Let me just refresh your memory, and for those who didn't attend the last class, is that typically what happens when you have, if I, okay. So say we have this as point. So typically what happened, if you try to boil, say, some water in a pan, you start the boiling. So we have now understood initially some part we will have natural, say the nucleate boiling, okay, the natural convection boiling would be there, and then there would be a region where we have a bubble that would collapse in the liquid, and nucleate boiling basically occurs. So till the essential this part, point A, we have some natural convection boiling. And then this part A to C consists of the nucleate boiling, where an intermediate point B between A and B, there would be this change from natural to nucleate boiling, where you would see the bubbles are forming and it collapses in the liquid. And then in this B to C range, C is basically here. So in this B to C range, what happens? The bubble now detaches from the surface and comes up to the gas liquid interface. So C is the point where we get the maximum heat flux. We say the critical heat flux in boiling. That is particularly achieved in nucleate boiling. So this is the portion we have the nucleate boiling. Now we have typically a transition region where this point D is called the Leidenfrost point, and from nucleate boiling, the film boiling starts from point D. Now, the point is that when we try to do it, or we try to practically see that what is happening or how it behaves, the actual boiling curve, okay, what happens in actual boiling curve, it doesn't follow this critical, or say the transition path. So what happens in case of, say, this actual case, you start hitting, it goes like this, and from critical, it quickly shifts to this point directly, because it is at the same boiling flux. and then it increases. Similarly, if you start cooling that liquid, the way it would follow is that it now follows like this red curve, where it comes till the Leidenfrost point, and then it shifts horizontally and then goes to the natural convection part. So this green highlighted line and the red highlighted line are the actual boiling curve that you'd observe. So which means what happens that you have a maximum heat flux point at point C. When you increase the temperature, the excess temperature shifts from this, say for water we mentioned around 30 to here, it is the surface temperature in the excess of 1000 degree or 1200 degree. Now the point that happens that if the melting temperature of the pot in which you are boiling the liquid, if this happens to be somewhere in below than this TS, say in this region, then what will happen? The pot will melt. So this is the burnout phenomenon. And the heat flask at this point we call the burnout heat flask. Now, as I mentioned, the point of having the understanding of all these boiling phenomena is basically that we have to realize that how do we find the Q dot, the heat transfer rate in boiling. So to start with, say in the nucleate boiling regime, the rate of heat transfer actually depends on the nucleation site. That means where the bubbles are forming and the number of nucleation sites, the nature of nucleation sites, the rate at which these bubbles are forming, etc., which are usually difficult to predict. Okay, so it is also influenced basically by the heating condition, the way you are heating. Everything dictates this nucleation sites, the number of it, the type, and the type after which this formation is happening. So that is why typically in the nucleate boiling regime, in fact, in all the boiling regimes, we will see that similar to our natural convection, different shape, size, and its orientation, we had several correlations for Nusselt number. Now here, one of such expression, let me just show you. For the others, I will not write those unnecessarily. We will not consume time behind those because eventually you would refer to such equation in the textbook or reference book when it is asked. Typically in closed question paper, when you have your end sum here physically, we typically provide those expressions. We provide all the necessary details. So let me just write to show you that what is or what it looks like basically. So if you try to find, so in case of nucleate boiling regime, Q dot nucleate, it is something like, I will explain each and every term. What are those? So this is one of such expression. So this is a correlation proposed by some researcher to find out what is the heat transfer rate during nucleate boiling, where Q dot nucleate on the left hand side is called the nucleate boiling heat flux. Quite obvious. Mu L is the viscosity of the liquid. This parameter you have already seen, it is called the enthalpy of vaporization, which has a unit of joule per kg. G is the gravitational acceleration. Rho L and V are the density of liquid and density of vapor. Sigma is the surface tension of the liquid vapor interface. You have a pool of liquid, the liquid vapor interface, you have a surface tension around each and every droplet or bubble. Not droplet, it is bubble basically. So sigma is done. Coming to the Cp part. Cp is the specific heat of the liquid. Okay. Ts is the, to be very specific, it is written say Cpl so that you understand clearly. It is specific heat of the liquid. Ts is the surface temperature. T saturation, this is the saturation temperature of the fluid. Okay. CSF is basically a constant that depends on the surface and fluid condition. So if the heating surface and the fluid condition, on this combination, the value of CSF typically varies. So A stands for the surface, A stands for the fluid. So CFS you can remember in that way. This we have explained already. PRL is basically the Prandtl number of the liquid. That's why the L is mentioned here clearly. So Prandtl number of the liquid, and N, the Prandtl number to the power N, the N stands for the experimental constant value that depends on the fluid. So you can now understand that how many parameters are involved in such calculation. Now, all these physicochemical properties would be made available to you, but since this would be an open test or open assignment, you have to find out from the appendices of the book, any standard textbook. You would find those values. Now, the point is, you have to also understand that heat flask I calculate for the nucleate boiling. That is fine. But what about the peak heat flux or the maximum heat flux that I can achieve? Now that also can be estimated based on certain correlation. So one of such is that we have CCR. CCR again is a constant. C is basically the constant, the similar kind of constant that you can think of, but CR stands for the critical. This value depends on the heater geometry, right, by which you are heating the surface, multiplied by latent heat of vaporization. Then you have surface tension, gravitational acceleration, rho v square, rho L minus rho V to the power 1/4. So such kind of correlation. So quite naturally that we need not remember all these correlations. Whenever it is required, we refer to the reference book and get it done. Similarly, because this maximum heat flask is essential, you have to know that how to avoid this that burnout phenomena that we have already discussed. Similarly, you also do not want your system to be operated in the latent frost region or the latent frost point. So minimum heat flask, that is also essential to understand. Okay, that is the lower limit of the heat flask in the film boiling region. And that is having a relation that looks like. So the point of showing all these correlations that you'd find in the textbook, such correlations which you have to use while solving the relevant problem. Rho L minus rho V divided by rho L plus rho V, this square to the power 1/4. So again, some correlations are there. Now this constant, this 0.09 is basically one determined value in such cases, and sometimes it is replaced depending on the type of heater geometry. For example, if the surface is a large horizontal flat plate or flat heater, so C critical has its own value that is in the range of say 0.15. Okay, so for such values, that means C critical, you'd find a table in the textbook or reference book where you'd find the C critical against different shape of the heaters, where you will have a table of different values. So you have to choose the appropriate C critical constant value. Similarly, for the film boiling, there is also correlations for the heat transfer that is available. Now, typically, the vapor properties are evaluated at the film temperature that we have seen earlier, which is the T surface plus T saturation divided by 2, which is the average temperature of the vapor film. Because in the film boiling, you have the surface covered with a film of vapor. Now, at very high surface temperature, heat transfer across this, you understand the scenario that you have a surface which is covered by a film of vapor. So when the surface temperature is very, very high, say around 300 degrees centigrade or above, then the heat transfer across this vapor film, the radiation becomes significant. So that needs to be considered. Fine. So when we have such scenario, we now know by this time that Q dot radiation is basically emissivity multiplied by the Stefan-Boltzmann constant, Ts to the power 4, T saturation to the power 4. Emissivity of the surface, Stefan-Boltzmann constant, and these temperatures are now in Kelvin. I hope you remember this. It is not now further in not degree centigrade, although it is written Ts and T saturation. This must be converted to the Kelvin. And then what happens? If you try to add these two, that means our Q dot film plus Q radiation, that would not give you the exact result. Okay, there are scenarios that you can simply add and get the total heat transfer during boiling. However, usually what happens, the heat transfer adversely affect each other. That means the total heat transfer is basically less than their sum, this sum. So say the radiation heat transfer from a surface to the liquid, it enhances the evaporation. So that means the thickness of the vapor film, and what happens? It increases, which means it decreases the convective heat transfer. I hope you're getting the point. The point is, say you have a surface and you have a vapor film. The surface is at now higher than 300 degrees centigrade. So it is higher than 300 degrees centigrade, the surface temperature. So that means radiation comes into play. Usually this has been seen that if the temperature is such higher, radiation will be there significantly. Now, once radiation comes into play, if the radiation is higher, if the emissivity of the plate is higher, then what will happen? More and more vapor will be generated. So that means this thickness will further increase, the vapor thickness, the vapor layer thickness. And as it increases, the convective heat transfer coefficient decreases. The rate at which heat was transferred by convection, it decreases. Because for convection, it acts as an insulation. So a correlation, again, a relation has been provided that actually matches well with the experimental data, and that is typically that Q total or Q dot total is equals to Q dot film plus 3/4 of the radiation. Any question till this part? So now the point is, even if we try to increase the heat transfer in nucleate boiling, how do we do that? Or say the pool boiling. The pool boiling heat transfer relation that we have seen typically is applied to smooth surfaces. That means when your heating surface is smooth, no roughness is there. Okay, so if you try, can you tell me that if you try to increase the heat transfer rate further or heat transfer in pool boiling, what you would do? What you can do basically? Anyone? Can anyone tell me that if we further think of the practical scenario, you are boiling some water in a pan. You are in the pool boiling region. That means where the fluid is stationary. There is no bulk motion of the fluid, and whatever the motion of the fluid is there, it is due to natural convection current. So how do you further increase, or how do you anticipate that I can increase the pool boiling heat transfer rate by this means? Anyone? Sushruti, what do you think? How can you increase further? Ayush? Ayush Shurana? Tanmay?
Sir, one way could be we'll just simply raise the surface temperature. That's
You rise the surface temperature,
what
it shifts to this burnout phenomenon. I mean, possibly you increase. So this is the point. This is the whole full boiling curve. You increase from this maximum heat transfer rate further, the temperature may go somewhere where the pot may melt.
then we can change the heating surface so that the constant CSF may change.
Yes. So that is typically done by roughening the surface. So because you understand that if we talk about the major component or the major contributor of the full boiling is the nucleate boiling. In nucleate boiling, what is happening? There are nucleation sites for the vapor. So that means where the vapors are generated. Now on a smooth surface, compared to the rough surface, say if you have scratched some surface, you have a scratchy surface. Now the vapor tendency would be to generate in those scratches. Okay, so that means you are providing nucleation sites. So it has been seen that if you introduce scratches or the surface roughness, those actually act as a kind of pocket where the bubbles are formed. And so quite naturally, the bubble formation rate increases. So it has been shown that in fact by a factor of 10 times, you can increase the heat transfer rate, the heat flask. But the point is that this much of high heat transfer rate you cannot have it for a prolonged period, or it cannot be sustained, because as the this surface, I mean this effect of the surface roughness decreases with time. So this heat flux eventually drops to what you would achieve in a smooth surface with time. But initially, you have a higher heat flux. And this surface roughness has very negligible influence on the critical heat flux value, this max. But the point is that, so that is why when I told you that how to increase the heat transfer rate, it is possible at the primary or the early stages of boiling. But eventually, the overall, the critical heat flux that you would get would be similar to that of the smooth surfaces. But then again, there are research stages of developing novel surfaces. Now, those material containing novel surfaces can actually provide some say porous structure. So pores, the matrix of pores, if you augment or if you come up with a novel material that has that kind of a morphology, surface morphology of say patterned surfaces of porous material, that can enhance the heat transfer rate. Any question? Now, in pool
So
boiling,
then by roughening the surface, the constant CSF will decrease, right?
it will have a different value. Okay, so this CR in the max is basically a critical constant that depends on the shape or the configuration of the heater.
Okay, sir.
Okay, so the material properties are basically included in these cases, like where you have this CSF I mentioned in the nucleate boiling regime, that surface fluid combination, a constant related to that. Okay, so now the point is that in pool boiling, we have considered that there is a motionless fluid, and whatever the motion is there, the bulk motion less fluid. And this vapor bubble motion that rises top and say coalesces or disperses, that is the result of buoyancy effect. But in flow boiling, so we have realized there are two types of boiling. One is the pool boiling, one is the flow boiling. In pool boiling, we had seen nucleate boiling, film boiling. In flow boiling, that means there would be an external force to move the fluid that undergoes phase change process. So this means it is a combination of convection, forced convection, plus pool boiling. So that means this flow boiling can also be categorized as external and internal, like external and internal flows by that nomenclature. Which means whether the fluid is forced to flow over a heated surface, that is the external flow, or it is forced to flow inside a pipe with phase change, that is the internal flow boiling. Internal flow boiling is basically more complicated than this external one because there is no free surface for the vapor to escape. So which means both the liquid and the vapor are forced to flow together, which interacts with each other and creates different flow regime inside the pipe, which complicates the analysis. What it happens, say when you start to flow, so initially you have, so this is the pipe and the flow is happening like from left to right. What will happen that there will be mostly liquid initially and few bubbles would form at a certain length from the entrance region. Now the bubbles would mostly form near the surface areas because the surfaces are where the heating is provided. This is called typically the bubbly flow regime. And then what happens that as you progress, okay, the fluid is further heated, the bubble grows in size and eventually coalesces. So the bubbles are now formed in a bigger sizes, which is kind of say now mixed due to the convective motion. It's present everywhere nearer to the wall, mostly also in the central region. This scenario is called the slug flow. That means you have a chunk of bubble, a bigger bubble, and surrounding you have a continuous fluid that is flowing. So say this half of the volume of the tube or the pipe is basically in the slug flow regime is occupied by the vapor. So kind of a 50-50% of volume by volume, you have liquid and the vapor phase in the slug flow regime. You further go along the pipe, it is further heated. Okay. Now the core of the flow will mainly consist of the vapors. And the continuous phase will be now on the sides. So this is the situation called the annular flow. Because the logic is pretty simple, that as the heating goes on, the vapor formation occurs near the surface, and then it tries to escape, it tries to come in the center. The comparatively cooler liquid goes near the surfaces. So at a certain, after a certain stage, you would see the liquids are near the wall and most of the vapors are forming the core of the flow, which is called the core annular flow. Again, after a certain length, what you would observe, if the heating is still persistent, there will be liquid droplets. The kind of mist flow. Because now this water will also vaporize. So what was initially a continuous phase consisting liquid has now become a dispersed phase in the continuous phase of vapor. So there is a complete inversion of the flow regime from initially bubbly flow, where you have bubbles inside liquid, to liquid droplets inside a vapor. So complete change in flow regime can be observed in internal flow boiling. And this is where whole complication begins for a complete internal flow. So you can understand there are 4 different types of, 4 or 5 in fact, because initially you have only forced convection where there was no bubble was forming. Then you have bubbly flow, after the slug flow, then core annular flow. Then there would be a slight transition from this liquid vapor flow to kind of a mist flow. And then again, once the mist is formed, it is kind of a forced convection containing a certain suspension of liquid fluid. So a crude estimate of heat flux in such cases is that you add Q dot for each and every component. 2, 3, whatever the flow regime you are observing, add the contribution of that and you get the Q total. This is a crude composition, crude estimation. That means you have Q dot 1 here due to forced convection. You have another relation to find out Q dot for bubbly flow. You add all these heat flux and you get the total estimation. Any question? Okay, so now coming to the final 2 bullet points, I'd say, during the condensation. So we have seen now the boiling part, the physics of it, and we have the condensation. So condensation occurs when you have a temperature of a vapor and you reduce it to below its saturation temperature. It is typically done when you bring those vapor in contact with a solid surface whose temperature is below the T saturation of a vapor. So if this is your surface, you have, and surface temperature is lower than the T saturation, you have the condensation that you would see, and the examples are several. You have seen such condensation. But what you have to now understand that, like the flow or the boiling stages, there are two different types of or forms of condensation that you can observe. One is called the film condensation, and the other is called the drop-wise condensation. In film condensation, what happens? The condensate wets the surface and forms a thin film of liquid. So for example, if you have a surface like this, what it would create a film of so if this is the blue one is your surface, you would have a film that is something like this on the surface. That is, we have got for the film condensation. That is the liquid film that would be there on the surface. Okay, so it slides down the surface under the influence of gravity, and the thickness of this liquid film would increase in the flow direction as the vapor basically condenses on the film. Now, this is how the condensation normally occurs in practice. Okay, in dropwise condensation, you have the condensed vapor that forms in type of droplet. So if you have this surface, you have then a drops of the condensate on the surfaces. So the condensed vapor that forms the droplets on the surface instead of a continuous film. Okay, so that means in film condensation, the surface would be covered by a blanket of liquid film that will have an increasing thickness. So which means it would act as a insulator or a resistance to the heat transfer. In this case acts as a blanket for further heat transfer to happen. The heat of vaporization, that is our HFG. Now this, when it is released as the vapor condenses, it has to pass through this resistance. Okay, So that means in dropwise condensation, what happens? Such scenario is not present. There is no as such blanket, but this droplet actually slides down once it is formed. But it has to reach a certain size. Okay, so basically that is why there is no as such liquid film in this case that resists the heat transfer. So that is why heat transfer rate in this dropwise condensation is nearly, and it has been shown that it is also 10 times larger than this film condensation. So that is why dropwise condensation is a preferable mode of condensation in heat transfer application. And that is why you see when we try to have our car windshield and side glasses, everything, we try to coat it with a coating so that this film wise condensation or film wise heating doesn't happen. This fog and all these things, so that we want that to be stick on the surface wall in a drop which can slide down. So that is why we use several surface modifications, coatings, etc. in order to transfer the subjects or to convert the surface so that it can produce or help us in achieving dropwise condensation. But the point is also you have to realize that this dropwise condensation will not be helpful for a prolonged period, because eventually when it comes down after reaching a certain size, it also creates a film if you leave it for a long time and if the surface is sufficiently long. Okay, so it eventually converts to film condensation. So that is why when you design a surface, you have to consider the limiting case, which is the film condensation, into account, so that you are prepared for the, I would say, the worst part, that eventually it will be film condensation. So no matter if you make the surfaces modified for the dropwise condensation, with a prolonged period, it eventually boils down to the film condensation. So now, again, similar to my previous discussion, if you look at the textbook, you would see several correlations have been provided based on this condensation type and the shape of the object. Again, in this film flow, you can understand there will be question of whether the flow is laminar or turbulent. You have to quantify laminar and turbulent. For their certain definitions are given, that is geometry specific, because eventually the characteristic length would be different for different geometry, and so the Reynolds number. So based on that Reynolds number categorization, be it a vertical flow or inclined flow or horizontal flow, you have a critical Reynolds number that would tell you whether the flow is laminar or turbulent. Based on that categorization, you have several correlations available. Whether it's an inclined plate, whether it's a vertical plate, whether it's a tube, etc., etc. And you use the appropriate correlation to find out your desired, to address the desired design problem. There are correlations for the dropwise condensation as well, where you can find what is the heat transfer coefficient of dropwise condensation for a certain range of temperature. So with this, I would conclude my lecture of this section as well as the overall heat transfer class for this session on my part. So if you have any question, now it's time to ask. Because after this, I will send you one assignment that would contain free convection and this boiling condensation, some question, few questions, in fact, not many. And then on 14th, you will have a 1 hour exam or test, whatever you consider. Again, there I will give you, say, 2 or 3 questions. And this time, I will not give you any, say, the time division or the marks division. It would be a complete cutoff after 1 hour. There is no part mark, I mean, let's say the late submission marking. So you would have 10 to 11, precisely at 9:55 or 9:57, you would get the question paper and you have to submit by 10:11.